All right, so I'm just going to try to rationally explain why basically people are deciding to have less kids. And we are all just products of our environment, in the sense that if you create a social environment and an economic environment around having kids, then that's what you're going to get. If you have a system that's centered around individualism and limited amounts of affordable housing, you're going to have a situation like what's happening in the United States, where there's not as many people being born, and there's more immigration. And the immigration is really what's keeping up the population. We don't have enough natural births here to basically replace the people that are dying. You need 2.1 natural births in order to basically replace the population. Not to grow it, but just to replace the amount of people that are dying. And you could say basically whatever you want, but the environment for younger people to have kids has become not as good. It was never great to start out with. You know, if you had a kid at like 18 years old, life wasn't going to be easy for you. But now with, there's certainly lots of forms of birth control, and I wouldn't say that there's more education around it, but there's just people don't feel like they can really have a family, and there's not the pressure from religion or from society anymore that's basically saying in order to be normal you have to have 2 or 3 kids and be married by the time you're like 22 years old. So that's kind of gone out the window, and people are exploring their options more. And like I've said in other videos, if you have a lot of options, you don't really want to commit to anything, at least early on in life. You want to be able to explore those and not settle into something. And it's really become unattainable anyway. What 20-year-old, 21, 22-year-old person or couple is going to be able to afford a house, even if it's a starter house at a reasonable price point? You're still looking at $300,000 probably, if for just a very modest house, pretty much even in an affordable place to live. So if you're 20, 22 years old, maybe you're making a household income of, like, if you're both working, maybe close to $100,000, maybe. But a lot of people are less than that. So the income's just not really there. And so people aren't having as many kids. And again, I think it's just really a result of the environment in which you are operating in. If you live in an environment where housing is cheap, you can have, basically one person work and have enough money to support not just your spouse or significant other, but your family, like a kid or 2 kids or even 3 kids, then people will do that because it's not a huge stretch financially. They feel like economically they can afford it. And there was some societal pressure before, right? Now there's really not any societal pressure for, you're not going to be really looked down upon if you don't have kids at a younger age. So that's probably the biggest reason. I think people would have kids if they felt like they could do it economically, but I think the kind of the breaking away from religion and the breaking away from the traditional family has caused less and less people to feel the pressure of having kids and being married by a certain age. And again, it's just not very realistic. You can't, on an income that a 22, 23-year-old person is going to have, they're not really going to be able to afford a home. So unless you're expecting them to live in multi-generational housing or start a family in an apartment, it's just probably not going to happen. So we've seen that people are having kids later, 30 to 31, 32 years old now, instead of, in your early to mid 20s. And a lot of that's, like I said, just due to the economic reality of it. I think it's a smart thing to do. If you can't work a normal job and have enough resources to support a family, then people are people are not going to do it. They're going to realize I basically can only afford my own life, and for me to not only get married, but to try to buy a house and to support one or two or multiple kids is going to be very not unrealistic, but just impossible, right? You're not going to be able to do it. A lot of people can't really even, qualify for a house. And then you throw on kids on top of that, it becomes basically like a pipe dream. Like, that's just not going to happen. So what do you guys think on that? I think the biggest factor of this change is just the pressure around it. There used to be a lot more pressure around, when you're a younger man and a younger woman, that you guys need to get together and start a family. But now that that's not really a thing anymore, I feel like people are on their own a lot more. So they're not necessarily pooling their resources from a young age, and that makes it harder to obviously own anything on your own financially. And then there's just less marriages and less families in general, because there's the women, women can work now. Women don't have to rely on men financially. They can pretty much do whatever they want. Some of them still want to have families. Some of them want to focus more on career. But inevitably, if more and more women focus on their career, they're going to delay having a family. So that's going to delay the amount of kids that are being born. And then, of course, women, once they get past a certain age, it's not that they can't have kids. It just becomes statistically less likely. If they're 35, 40, 45 years old, you're not probably going to be having more than one kid at the most if you're 40 years old. So priorities change. I think a lot of it is just societal and economical factors. You're a product of the environment in which you're raised. If you feel a lot of pressure to have kids and settle down, and that's how you can economically get stability, then people will do that. But if you have options to, date around and not necessarily commit to anything, and you can earn enough income to survive on your own, then that is an option that I think a lot of people are taking. And it's resulting in just less population replacement and less population growth and more immigration. And, the United States is certainly becoming more and more diverse in terms of the makeup of the country. It's becoming less of, the white people, and I think more of a diverse group of people, right? Because in order to keep the population steady, they have to, there's immigration from a lot of countries, legal immigration and illegal immigration that are occurring. And it probably has to continue in terms of immigration, because there's just not enough younger people being born. You have to give young people a reason to repopulate, right? If they don't feel like they have like a better future, like, hey, I can support my family and I'm comfortable with my job and I feel good economically, they're going to kind of hesitate or balk at having a family, because you kind of have to be well off financially or have your stuff together to really have a family, right? Because your finances are tight. You probably want to have a house. You're going to have a lot of expenses on a monthly basis that you're going to need to have a reliable source of income or lots of savings to pay for. So if you don't have those things, in place, or you're confident that you're going to get those soon, I think a lot of people are just saying, you know what, I don't think this is the right time right now. And it's easy to say that, because it really never is the right time to have kids or change your life dramatically. But you do want to have kind of the basics, the building blocks set up. Like I said, having probably a house, even if it's a modest house. You probably want to be married. You probably want to have a decent job. And then you can think about, potentially having kids. But a lot of those things aren't happening for people until they're older. They're not happening at 21 or 22 years old anymore. They're happening at 31 or 32 years old or 35 years old. And when you don't start thinking about having kids until you're 35, inevitably you're just going to have less kids. People a few generations ago, like I've said in other videos, it was common for people to have 5, 6, 7 kids a few generations ago. And then, my generation was typically like 3 kids. And now it seems like it's maybe 1 or 2 kids, or a lot of people just don't have any kids, and a lot of people just aren't married, you know, because of the way things are set up. There's no more pressure around getting married or having kids. Economically, it's a huge burden. And if you don't have, you know, if you don't have a great job and you don't have a lot of money, people are just deciding not to go down that path. They value their freedom, and they become kind of more of a minimalist and or only concerned about themselves. So you guys let me know what you think on it. It's an interesting topic, and put your comments in there. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.